Welcome back to the big show. We have with us Aaron Everett of AE Pets, as well as everyone's favorite feline, Venmo. Venmo is wanted to join this call to provide some input, but I think he's got a import, actually helping out with an import from South Africa. In the meantime, I think you have an email, a letter there from someone from Nevada, if you could bring it.
Yeah, Beth from Reno, Nevada asks, why is international pet shipping so expensive, and how can someone on a budget bring the price down?
Yes, we get that question a lot, and because it's expensive, it's ridiculously expensive. The biggest components of the cost, if you're hiring a pet shipper, and there's going to be costs anyway, but if you're hiring a pet shipper on top of that, a dog going international in cargo, which is the standard, typical, usually way you got to go, is air freight. And that is what the airlines charge for you to put their pet, live animal, in their cargo hold, and it's safe and all that, and well lit. There's other cargo, other pets, but that's the most expensive. And the reason that airline freight is so expensive, is
risk.
Right. And it's not the risk or the likelihood that the pet's going to get across or cross safely, because that's going to happen. It's very rare for there to be any incident. It's never happened to us. But if that did happen, it's not out of the question, then that's a terrible publicity. It's just the worst case scenario. Consequences are dire. So that raises the price because they're taking on that risk. The second most expensive portion, if you're hiring a pet shipper, is probably the fee from the pet shipper. All right. So it takes a lot of time, a lot of expertise, a lot of patience, and that's probably your second component. And then everything else kind of falls in behind that. But there's something that we can't forget about, actually, that should be included. It's just we don't usually pay it when we do the transport. It's the pet owners. So the veterinarian is going to charge the pet owner for their time. They're not going to charge us. So if you're calculating costs, budgeting costs, keep in mind that there's a veterinary fee, because they're going to charge you something too, obviously. Even if you use a pet shipper, you still have to take your pet to the vet to have them examined, or at least pay for that office visit. Advice would be to check way ahead and find out what they charge. And then I would kind of shop around, leave yourself a lot of time, 2, 3, 4 months. There's a list. We're going to put it right here at the bottom. It's a USDA accredited vets, USDA APHIS accredited vet list. It's a link that goes to a list. Drop in your zip code, and you can look at all the USDA vets around. You call them up, ask them how much they're charging, and that could save you several $100, especially if you got a lot of pets, because they usually charge per pet. If you have 3 or 4 cats or 3 or 4 dogs, it can be there between $2,000 and $600. So are you seeing some pretty ridiculous prices that vets are charging, and reasonable ones too? We got a big swing from really affordable, reasonable, and then the other side, which is just highway robbery. What's the highest one you've seen?
So far, which is probably the most recent one, is $575
per pet.
per pet.
Yeah, right. And so what I would do is I would call and find out what that fee is, because on the cheap side, right, we work with veterinarians who are charging $180. I don't remember. There are some vets in Chicago that
Chicago was charging $85 for us.
Shut up.
Yeah.
$85 a pet?
Yeah, because
That's
we
highway
do
robbery.
the majority of the work.
Right. No, I get it. Okay. Maybe that is kind of illustrates how, in that case at least, that we do most of the work. What is the best way for starters, what's the best way to bring the cost down if you're on a budget?
Probably do it yourself.
Right. And so there's a whole episode that you can check out regarding doing it yourself. And it's not just how to do it yourself, it's to decide if you want to do it yourself, because there's lots of variables and factors and destinations and everything comes into play. So as far as, like I said, air freight is really the most expensive component, and a couple of expensive airlines, there aren't really expensive airlines.
But wait, there's 2 other ways to save some money
Yes.
for people that are taking their pets. There's one, under the seat in front of them, but the pet has to be super small, or 2, as excess baggage, but not all countries allow that.
Right. And not all airlines allow that. And sometimes airlines don't even know if they allow it. And so those are, under the seat, has to be a little, like maybe under 10 pounds, 12 pounds, something like that. Different airlines are different. But that's really cheap. Cats, I don't know how they do that, because the cats are very unhappy with the situation. They're meowing in an international trip the whole way. I don't know how that works. But that's an option, but there's got to obviously fit these criteria. And the airlines, sometimes the airlines won't do it internationally. Definitely not UK or like Australia. And then the excess baggage is like, here's my, like I've mentioned this a bunch of times. Here's just like luggage. Here's my 2 suitcases and my dog. And that's pretty cheap too. A few $100. You're on your own though, as far as health certificates and paperwork. You may have to hire someone to do that anyway. And it's not as reliable. And the airlines, again, don't really know if you call passenger. It's passenger side. It's not cargo side. It's passenger, where they're dealing with humans all the time. When it comes to pets, they're a little bit fish out of water kind of, or they don't talk to cargo, or aren't informed. And they will mislead people. We get calls from people like that, or get calls from pet owners who thought they could go as excess luggage. Here's my luggage. Here's my dog. And there's some restriction, or the country had a restriction. It's just, and you can't track it. There's a bunch of reasons. That's the trade-off. It's cheaper, but it's just not reliable. You're on your own, and it's kind of precarious. I asked EE to do some research and pull up the most expensive transport we've ever done. And what is the damage?
The damage was $19,633.23.
Okay. That's obviously ridiculous. They're big dogs, they're tall. German Shepherds are they don't usually take, and they require custom crates. Usually a Great Dane. Usually it's just a Great Dane will require, a Great Dane is bigger than all the standard off-the-shelf crates, the biggest ones. But in this case, these German Shepherds were so big. They're just tall, 100-pound German Shepherds, big as they get. Big, tall ears. So top of the ears or head had to be 4 inches to the roof clearance.
Yeah, probably maybe taller than my bun.
Right. And those are just the ears. And those ears were probably 6 inches tall. And so they went to Malaysia.
They went to Valencia, Philippines.
And so it was difficult. So it's Asia, which is a long way, and it's giant crates, wooden, heavy giant crates into Manila. And then we had to get those dogs off. And then it didn't stop there. We had to get those dogs, those big crates, to some little island.
Domestic flight costed a lot, surprisingly, even though it's such a short distance.
So I was surprised that they could get those big crates, because usually domestic flights, regional flights aren't that big. And I thought, how are they going to get those big crates on a boat? That's one thing. They usually don't take pets. The regional aircraft usually don't take the big crates because they're regional aircraft, but they made that work. I couldn't believe it. And so altogether, that was hugely expensive. And there's some boarding there while they had to make the crates, because the pet owners had to go across, and the dogs had to stay back because we had to build these custom crates for them. So that's another, and custom crates are at least $1,000 a piece, and then boarding. So that's the rural
Boarding
record.
was a lot.
Do you have the cheapest one there in front of you?
But I think our cheapest one that we've done was a cat to Amsterdam, and that was around $3,000.
Really? And so, cut!
AE Pets loves their cats and dogs.